In this video, I'm going to summarize some of the insights from the book, The Millionaire Fastlane. I thought this was going to be a really bad one when a friend recommended it to me. And the friend said, no, trust me, ignore the clickbait title, which is The Millionaire Fastlane, and read the book because it's genuinely really good. And this probably is the single best book that I have ever read on how to build a business that makes money. And so, this video, we're going to be breaking down 5 key lessons from the book and also the 5 commandments of building a business. The author of this book talks about how to become rich quick. Now, the first important lesson in this book is that we want to avoid the slow lane, and it is very possible to get rich quick, and that is why we are talking about the millionaire fast lane. It is possible to get rich quick, but it's not at all possible to get rich easy. So if someone is trying to sell you that it is easy to get rich, that is a scam and you should avoid it. And one of the interesting thing that he talks about in the book is the idea that there are 3 paths through life. There's a path number 1, which is the sidewalk. There's a path number 2, which is the slow lane, and a path number 3, which is the fast lane. The sidewalk is basically where people who are living paycheck to paycheck, like people who don't have a lot of money. But I think the second path through life, the slow lane, is interesting because if you follow the slow lane, you can still get rich. And the slow lane is generally, if you're watching this, probably your parents' generation. The idea of the slow lane is that you go to school, you get the good grades, you get a decent job, you work your way up the ladder in your job. Whatever your job is, you save some percentage of your paycheck, you put that into an investment, maybe in a stock market. But probably, you should invest in property, real estate, because property is good investment. And over the time, eventually, you will have enough of a nest egg such that when you retire, you will be rich and you can enjoy your retirement at the age of like 65. Basically, the idea of a slow lane, and he talks about how there are 3 traps that we can fall into which will end up keeping us on the slow lane. The first trap is that life is slow lane looks pretty safe. You could think that, okay, once I get the job, then maybe my life is pretty safe and I'm pretty sorted. But actually, not that safe. There are a ton of other unexpected events that happen in your life, like maybe the pandemic hits, if there's a market crash like there was in 2008. The second trap that the slow lane can fall into is the idea that we build our intricate market value enough that we get rich. For example, there are people who think, okay, I'm working my job 2 years now, I'm going to go get an MBA and pay like an exuberant amount of money to get an MBA degree, and then maybe my worth will increase more to my future employer. But the problem with that sort of a thinking is that it's not really the fast lane approach to building wealth. It's still ultimately trading your time for money. And yes, fine, if you get that extra degree, if you get that extra qualification, your time will be worth more a little bit, but maybe even significantly more. But ultimately, you're still just trading your time for money. And that is a very slow lane, a way to approach building wealth. And the third trap that slow dangers fall into is just not even believing it's possible to get rich quick unless you're super lucky or super talented. But as the author says, even if you can't get rich easy, which is not a thing, you can get rich relatively quick. If quick is like 10 years, 10 years is defined as quick, which is, to be honest, is pretty quick. But a lot of us, when we think about getting rich, we think a few weeks. Like, what he's arguing for is the process that will take probably around 10 years to get rich quick. That is actually quick in this book, and that brings us to lesson number 2, which is to work the process. Now, in the book, he talks a lot about wealth is not an event. Like, getting rich is not a sort of a binary thing where one day we're living paycheck to paycheck and the next day suddenly we get millions in the bank. It is a long, drawn out process that takes usually many years to do. But the problem is that the media often reports wealth as being an event, and those are the stories we latch on to. One of the stories he talks about is this guy, John Bikoff. He founded Glycovitamin Water in like 1996, and 11 years later he sold a company to Coca-Cola for 4.1 billion. The thing that people remember is the event, but what they forget is the process of 11 years that took so long to get to that point. Therefore, wealth building is not an event, it's a process. It's exactly the same thing with like building a creative business, building a YouTube channel. Like, it's easy to see creators, their overnight successes, all the jazz. but you don't see the 5 years they spend making videos, and no one watches to get to the point where they could have the event of the overnight success. This brings me to lesson number 3, is to build money trees. Now, we've all heard the phrase that money doesn't grow on trees, but what he says is the book is the in the book is the money does actually grow on trees, provided you build a tree that grows money. So what does this mean? He says in the book that money trees are business systems that survive on their own. They require periodic support and nurturing, but they survive on their own, creating a surrogate for your time for the money you trade. Basically, what we're doing is we're building a business where we're building the money tree, where the amount of wealth we can generate is not directly tied up to the amount of time that we're putting into it. This brings us to the next question, which is how do we actually build a money tree? And he talks about there are like 4 to 5 different types of money trees that we could potentially build. So the first one is that we could build a rental system. And a rental system is basically anything that involves renting out something that you already own. So if you have a bunch of real estate like properties and you rent them out, that is rental system. The problem is that it's very hard to get to the point where you have a bunch of properties to rent out, because you're already probably rich at that point. So the other way of building a rental system is by licensing. For example, if you are a musician and you want to license your audio, the other people can use, in a way they're paying you rent for this thing. You could build a distribution system. This basically is a system that connects people who want something with the people who are supplying that thing. So for example, Amazon is a distribution system. It connects its buyers with its sellers, and Amazon is the middleman. And therefore, if you build a middleman, if you build a distribution system, you can get really, really rich. The third type of money tree we want to create is a software system. Now, that's pretty standard, make the software once and then you can charge people for the software or for the digital product, and then you can make money multiple times, because the cost of distribution and the cost of replication is effectively zero. Fourth system that the author talks about is my favorite kind, and that is content money. The content system, where basically the idea is to create content. So if you write a book or make a YouTube video or write a blog post or make an online course that you can sell, ultimately this is all the content it takes. You have to just invest time and effort to write the book, create the content once, but then you can sell it multiple times to multiple people further down the lane. And similarly, to the digital stuff, it has basically zero cost of replication and distribution. Assuming it's on the internet, and if it's a book, well, then there's some cost associated with it. But it's still broadly a way of making money that's not tied to your own time. So lesson number 4 now, which is switch from being a consumer to being a producer. Now, from a young age, society broadly teaches us that we could be consumers, we should be thinking about what we want to buy. It's based on being a consumer, but as the author tells us in the book, this consumer mindset is never going to help us to actually build wealth. Instead, we need to think of a producer mindset, and this genuinely changes the way that you approach the world. Lesson number 5 shows commitment. Don't just show interest. And a very important message that the author talks about through this book is basically, there's a difference between interest and commitment. You have to do things that other people are not willing to do or not able to do, and usually that shows commitment rather than just interest. And there's a nice note from the book where he says that interest works in your business 1 hour a day on Monday through Friday. Commitment works in your business 7 days a week, whenever time permits. If you care about building wealth in a short amount of time, you can take the easy route, have like a chilled out life, and just do you. But you have to start committing to the stuff that you're doing rather than just being interested in it. And there's so many people I know who started YouTube channels or businesses that are like, I just want to do it for half an hour, 1 hour a day. But that's fine. Yeah, if you can do it for half an hour a day as a hobby. But which gets me to my fairness. It kind of depends on what your goals are. If you want to be a if you want to make money, if you want to make a big business out of it, you will have to approach with a mindset of commitment rather than having just interest in some things. Okay, so we've talked about the 5 different lessons, and in fact, like, there's a ton of more of this. It's a very, very dense book. He says that 90% of the businesses fail within the first 5 years because they don't satisfy the commitment of need, the commandment of the need of the people, actually. The things you offer, like, we have to create a business that provides value and solves people's needs or wants in some way. And if you're not doing it, it's really, really hard to build a business based on something that tries to solve a problem that people don't actually have or need the product for. Secondly, if we have the commandment to enter, and the idea here is that if you ideally want to build a business in the zone where the barrier to entry is high rather than low, and the reason you want to do this is because a higher barrier to entry means that it's very difficult for someone else to copy your business. Like, for example, if you and me decide we wanted to start the next Amazon, that's really hard. There is a very high barrier to entry to start the next Amazon. But if there's a business that looks easy to other people to start, there's a low barrier to entry. And for example, like starting a YouTube channel where barrier to entry is low, and starting a podcast where it's even lower. Okay, so in order to grow rich, the idea is to want to build a business that has the potential to scale up. For example, starting a barbershop and cutting people's hair for one is not a business that has very much potential to scale unless you try and build up more and more barbershops and a chain of barbershops that then that costs loads of money, whereas a software business or a content business really does have the potential to scale. So ideally you want to build a business that satisfies the common scale. And there's another thing that he talks about in the book that we haven't talked about in the video, which is the law of affection. The law is that to make millions, you have to impact millions. And it's pretty simple. Like, if you want to make millions on YouTube channel, you have to be able to impact millions of people. If you want to make millions in your business, you have to impact millions of people, or impacting fewer people but with like a very large amount of impact. So the commandment of scale kind of relates to that. You can't get rich quick off of selling lemonade in your local neighborhood. You have to build a business that has the potential at least for scale. And finally, we have the commandment of time. Now the idea here is, as we talked about before, if you want to build a business where the value of the business is disconnected from your personal time input, like if you have to show up every single day 9 to 5 or whatever, how many ever hours to make your money, then that's not really true wealth. So that's a very, very long summary of some of the lessons that this enormous, really, really good book, The Millionaire Fastlane, would recommend. Thank you so much for watching and giving your time to this. If you found any of the tips useful, if you're already doing something like this in your life, please do drop in the comments below, and I'll be happy to know what you think about these. Thank you so much for listening.